Hey everyone, welcome to Dangerous Werewolf. Are you brave enough to step into the perilous world of werewolves with me? Here, we'll uncover the secrets, face the fears, and explore the thrilling and dangerous aspects of these mythical creatures. So hold on tight and let's start this wild adventure together. New home. Originally, I had planned on this being a good week. The winter months were finally over and it was starting to get hot. Plus, that meant that the school year would soon be over, meaning I'd graduate. But then came Vincent. In less than 48 hours, he's managed to rip away from me my freedom, my family, and my future. That stupid mutt has ruined my life beyond repair, and I've known him for only 2 days. I shakily hung up the phone and walked back into the living room where Annie was cuddled up next to Reed, who had both arms secured around her. "Everything all right?" she asked. She picked up the remote and lowered the volume on the TV so that she could hear my response. "Yeah," I lied, not wanting to upset Reed. "Alpha said that it was time I moved in with my mate, so he moved my stuff today." Through my entire explanation, I could feel my hands trembling and my throat get dry. I didn't want to live with Vincent or any werewolf for that matter. What if he sheds on my clothes? Danny knowingly nodded, giving me a sympathetic look. Reed grunted. Good. I internally gagged at his beliefs that mates should be tied to their werewolves. It's so disgusting. Well, Nora, Danny chimed in. Me and Reed were going to have a pool party tomorrow since it's supposed to be in the low 90s. Reed perked up. Vincent, as in Vincent Tabin. Sighing, I nodded. Reed's eyes were wide as saucers now. I had no idea you were the mate to the future beta. I'm sorry about my cold attitude before. He stumbled over his words, obviously scared of something. Hudden could sense my confusion. The beta is like the vice president in the werewolf community. If something happens to Alpha, then the beta will step in. Well, I get stuck with the second in command wolf. Awesome not. I didn't if Vincent were Alpha. He's a dog. An overly possessive dog who ruined my life in a few short hours. There was a knock on the door and Reed gently moved away from Danny, giving her a quick peck on the cheek. He then went to answer it. After a few seconds, he came walking into the living room followed by none other than Vincent. Just great. Nora, Vincent nearly growled. Why aren't you at home? His fists were clenched and I could see he was grinding his teeth, his canines poking out of his mouth. His eyes stabbed in my direction, sending a chill down my spine. He was pissed. There's no doubt about it. I was just kicked out of my home. I spat, knowing that he was referring to his house as my home. But that dwelling will never be my home. Ever. I'll leave as soon as I can, even if I don't have the help of Reed's sister. I'll just make a run for it when he's not around. Vincent pinched the skin in between his eyes. You know what I mean. Why did you leave? I searched my mind for some valid excuse. I wanted someone around me. Danny and I are partners on a school project. I needed to talk to Danny to know how to get used to being a werewolf's mate. Then it hit me I don't owe this dog anything. 'Cause I wanted to. I shrugged. Danny let out a gasp and Reed disapprovingly shook his head. I suppose he'll always think little of me, no matter what Vincent's rank was in the werewolf world. Vincent, a scowl on his face, walked over to me, snatching my arm in his huge hand. Let's go home, he growled. He began to leave the house, roughly pulling me behind him. I tried to stop him, planting my feet firmly on the ground, but he was too strong for me. He would just tug every now and then, making me stumbling to keep up with his wide steps. We were outside of the door when I turned back to Danny, who would read next to her, most likely to watch. Danny, I called. I'd love to come to your party tomorrow. Vincent stopped in his tracks, right at the beginning of the sidewalk. He turned to look at me, a scowl still on his face. What party? A pool party. It's supposed to be hot tomorrow, so I'd like to keep my body temperature down to avoid overheating and dehydration, I clarified. I figured that adding that it'd be medically wise for me to go to this party. It would play with Vincent's instincts to protect me. Vincent looked up at Danny, who would read step in front of her. Will there be males at this pool party? Vincent demanded to know, tightening his grip on my arm to the point where it started to hurt a little bit. Reed nodded. The invitation extended to you as well, Beta, he said in a soft voice full of respect that I never got. Kiss ass. Vincent mulled over it for a little bit. We'll go, he decided, calling him and me a wee gross. Plus he had to go and ruin my plan. Since Crystal, Reed's sister, was supposed to be there, I was going to scrape up $500 I could tell Vincent I needed for some protection or something. Then I'd give it to her and leave to Florida. Now I'll have to wait even longer. Vincent continued walking, pulling me all the way to his house. It was really embarrassing. There were people and werewolves outside their homes who would see me getting yanked by an angry wolf. And no one did anything. All the werewolves acted as if this was the right thing, giving me a dirty look while looking at Vincent with admiration. All the humans would look at me with pity or go out of their way to look at something else, ignoring me and Vincent altogether. Eventually we reached his house and I was ushered inside. Vincent then slammed the door shut and even locked it. He then turned to me, the pissed-off expression still dominant. Now, Nora, he growled. He stopped and cleared his throat, followed by a few deep breaths. Then, in a controlled voice, continued. I noticed that you aren't warming up to me like what most mates do. So tell me, what can I do to make you happy with me? Let me go. I know I couldn't say that. Ever. There were urban legends that were spread among the humans. The main one centered on this girl named Lacey who lived in a territory in what used to be known as British Columbia. Lacey was a human who was chosen to be the mate of a regular, ranked werewolf. One day Lacey told her werewolf mate that she hated him, and he attacked her. Legend has it that he broke her legs so that she couldn't run away from him. And every time they heal, he breaks them again. But God willing, that's just a horror story my mom told me to stay away from the werewolves. Why couldn't I have just been homeschooled? Then this whole predicament could have been avoided. Anyway, back to why Lacey is pertinent. I don't want to wind up like her, hence I need to at least behave civilly towards Vincent. I just need time. I muttered, looking down at my feet. I heard Vincent sigh. You hungry? I looked up at him, shrugging again. Vincent then smiled. I got you mushroom pizza. Your friend Jessie told me it was your favorite food. He turned to walk to what I suppose was the kitchen. I couldn't believe that Jessie was talking to this creepy werewolf. And worst of all, telling him stuff about me. I huffed and went into the living room to sit down on the couch. Vincent's house was rather dull, to tell the truth. It was 2-story, had white walls, and all the furniture was either black or white. There was nothing remarkable about it at all, which was odd. I would have figured that a werewolf's house would have piles of dead bodies all over the floor or be like a cave. Instead, I got stuck with the contemporary werewolf. Vincent walked back into the living room with a pizza box. He set it on the coffee table in front of me and sat right next to me. He was so close that his whole side was pressed against mine. He leaned forward and opened up the pizza box, revealing the delectable pizza that made my stomach growl. He grabbed a slice that had extra mushrooms on it and handed it to me. Here ya go. He smiled. Thanks. I mumbled, immediately starting to eat the delicious slice. Vincent grabbed himself a slice and turned on the TV. The channel was set on the news, the reporter confirming the heat wave that Danny had mentioned earlier. Vincent cleared his throat. Jason came and dropped your clothes off earlier. I put the boxes up in our room, he said before filling his mouth with more pizza. Jason. Alpha. It was weird to hear Alpha's first name. It then dawned on me that I knew almost nothing about Alpha. I knew he was man and that he had no mate. That was pretty much it. Now I know he's friends with Vincent and his first name is Jason. Me and Vincent sit watching TV for a couple hours. There is nothing good on at all. Vincent put on some sitcom where the main characters were played by werewolf actors. The jokes were centered on werewolf culture, so I didn't really understand it when Vincent burst out laughing. When the sun went, it was close to 11. Vincent turned off the TV and let out a big yawn. I think it's time for bed, mate, he announced. He stood up and waited there. I didn't move and then Vincent rolled his eyes and grabbed my hand, pulling me to my feet. I was led up the stairs and through the dark hall, not being able to see a thing in the darkness. I was blindly led by Vincent into a room and was soon assaulted with a flash of light from the light bulb. Vincent's bedroom was small. He had a queen-sized bed in the center and that was it. There was no more furniture, unless I counted the few boxes in the corner of the room that contained my clothes. Vincent let go of my hand and walked over to the closet doors, throwing them open. Inside the closet was his dresser, which he pulled open, grabbing a pair of pajama bottoms that were black. He made a move to pull off his shirt and I turned around to give him some privacy. It was supposed to be a polite notion, but at the same time I didn't want to see a naked werewolf. Vincent chuckled. You do know, mate, that one of these days you're going to see me naked. The sooner the better. He laughed. I didn't move. He sighed. And go to the bathroom and brush your teeth. Use the blue toothbrush. I left the room and blindly felt my way using the walls until I came to a door that I opened. I felt inside the dark room and flicked on the lights which I found. The bathroom was lighted up and I walked over to the sink. It looked clean. I picked it up and put some toothpaste on it, brushing my teeth quickly. After 2 minutes, I rinsed out my mouth and put the used toothbrush back on the counter. Good. You found it, Vincent said from behind me. I jumped and turned around. Vincent was only wearing the pajama bottoms. His chest was on full display, showing off his massive muscles. His abdominals were chiseled and his pecs were powerful. His arms were rippled with muscle and were crossed in front of his mighty chest. This werewolf just reeked of masculinity. Vincent strutted forward, grabbing the toothbrush I just used and put more toothpaste on it. Then he stuck it in his mouth, brushing his teeth. Dude, I shrieked with disgust. Vincent jumped in surprise, looking at me with worry, wondering what it was he did to upset me. You made me use your toothbrush, I accused. That's nasty. Vincent smiled. It's our toothbrush. Mate, we share everything now. Now get to bed. I groaned and stormed off into his bedroom. I snatched some of the blankets off and threw them to the floor. I then took one of the pillows and threw that on the floor as well, creating a makeshift bed. I then jumped into the real bed, getting out of the remaining covers. I closed my eyes and Vincent walked in, growling. I'm not sleeping on the floor. Mate, Vincent growled. Scoot over. He turned off the light and I was blinded again. I heard his footsteps approach the bed and soon felt the left side sink under his weight. The covers were lifted a bit as he got under them. I felt the heat in the bed shoot way up as he settled in next to me. Good night, mate, he whispered, kissing my forehead. He paused for a bit. I rested my head on the pillow and turned away from him, attempting to sleep on my side. Vincent cleared his throat. Do you know how mates sleep together? He asked, engulfing my tiny shoulder in his giant hand. No, I groaned. In werewolf culture class, we never went over the actual mating part of mates. Bedtime was all foreign to me. Well, Vincent started. There's 3 different positions. He paused and shifted closer to me. The first occurs when you are sick or scared. When that happens, the bed will be scooted to touch the wall. You'll be on the side touching the wall, and I'll spoon you on the other side, acting as a shield. The second and most common is the default one. In this, you rest your head on my chest and my arms are wrapped around you. He stopped for a little bit, and the third occurs when a mate tries to leave their wolf. The wolf will have his arms wrapped around his mate, lying on top of them. This keeps the mate trapped to the wolf. Oh, I knew why he told me this. The last one sounded a little creepy. Plus, Vincent had like 50 pounds of muscle on me, so I decided it would be best to cooperate just this once. I rolled back around, facing Vincent. The moonlight that leaked into the bedroom window glistened off his canines, gleaming. I felt his strong arms wrap around me, pulling me closer to him. He pulled me up and placed my head on his hard chest. The sound of his heartbeat consumed my ears, being all that I could hear. I love you, mate, he whispered, his chest vibrating with his words. Night. Pool party PT. 1. I have no idea when the last time was that I woke up as peacefully as I am now. The sunlight poured into the room through the window that I faced, gently bringing me out of my unconsciousness. My head didn't feel heavy when I lifted it up, yet I felt like the covers were extra heavy, keeping me close to the warm mattress. That didn't bother me. I rested my head back down on the soft, warm pillow. I've never felt this relaxed. Morning, mate, Vincent purred, making my pillow vibrate with his deep voice. Oh wait, my pillow is his chest and my blanket is his arms. Well, there goes my relaxation. I pushed myself up off Vincent's chest and sat upright. Vincent pushed himself up as well. His hair was disheveled from the night's sleep. He stretched out his beefy arms until I heard a pop. He smiled and leaned back on the headboard. It's almost 12, he noted. You want to get ready for that pool party soon. 12. I glanced around the room, finding no clock so I couldn't tell the time. How can you tell? I asked, mainly out of curiosity. Vincent's grin got larger, probably because I was having a little conversation with him. He got off the bed and walked over to the window, motioning with his hand for me to follow. I reluctantly obeyed and went over to the window. See how the sun's more in the middle of the sky? He asked, pointing to it. I looked and had to squint. Sure, that means it's noon. When it's closer to the east, then it's morning. West is evening. He stood back, looking at me with an eager face. Cool, I muttered, finding this astronomy lesson rather boring. I walked away from the window and over to the boxes in the corner of the room that contained my clothes. I popped open the first one, finding it full of my underwear and brass. Alpha touched my underwear and brass. The thought of some grown man touching my intimate items of clothing made me blush. Hopefully Vincent hadn't gone through this box. Why don't you just pick out what you want to wear and we'll put the rest away when we get back? He offered. I just nodded. Vincent smiled and went over to the closet where his dresser was. He pulled out the second drawer, grabbing a pair of black swim trunks and a white wife beater. Now call me crazy, but I expected him to go change in the bathroom like a normal person. Instead, he pulled down his pajama pants and boxers, actually revealing his nude body to me. I quickly turned around. After taking a quick peep, Vincent laughed. Like what you see? He asked. Oh God. No, I scowled. I shifted through the box, searching for my bathing suit. It was a nice yellow string bikini that I spent a few weeks doing chores around my house to earn. I really liked it because it had padding in the top that didn't make it look like I belonged to the itty bitty titty committee. Finally, at the bottom of the box, I spotted it and pulled it out. I put it under my arms and shifted to the second box for some shorts and a shirt to wear over it. I felt a pair of arms wrap around my waist. "Mate," Vincent growled into my ear, "wear something appropriate." I shrugged him off, continuing to look for some shorts. I had some jean shorts and a black shirt that I wanted to wear mainly because of the thin material. Inside the bedroom was a little warm, so outside must be scorching. Found them. I pulled out my shorts and shirt, hearing another growl from Vincent, who immediately snatched them from my hands. At least he left the bikini under my arms, which I let drop to the floor so that he couldn't take it from me. "This is too revealing," Vincent snarled, holding up my shorts and shirt. He looked genuinely pissed, his eyes flickering yellow for a brief second. His eyebrows were knit together in frustration and he had his teeth bared. "It's hot outside." "I wind. And besides, you're wearing a thin tank top that shows off all your chest muscles. Don't you think that's revealing for a guy?" I crossed my arms in front of my chest, trying to look tough. Vincent towered over me by at least a foot and he leaned in, intimidating me with his size. "That's different," he growled. I cocked my eyebrow. "I'm showing that I'm strong, hence I can protect you, therefore keeping threats away. You're just dressing to show off your body. Why don't I just wear a burlap sack then?" I scoffed, turning away from him so that I could look for some less revealing shorts. The only longer ones I could find were black basketball shorts I wore that one time I thought I could play sports. "Better, deception," Vincent smiled, kissing the top of my head. He turned and left the room, probably to go brush his teeth with the one frickin' toothbrush in the house. Disgusting. As soon as he was gone, I stripped out of the clothes I had slept in and tied on the skimpy bikini that I knew he'd be pissed to see me wear out in public. However, I could care less about what he thinks and wants me to wear. Contrary to popular werewolf belief, he doesn't own me. As soon as my bathing suit was on, I put on a t-shirt and the basketball shorts over it. Vincent walked back into the bedroom and gave me a nod of approval. "That's my girl." He smiled. He came over to me, grabbing my hand in his giant one, leading me out of the room. He led me to the bathroom, opening up the cabinet beneath the sink and pulled out a small plastic tub with hair care products in it. He set it on the counter. The tub had hairspray, mousse, and a hairbrush in it. "I, didn't know exactly what you wanted to use for your hair. And I know that, for some reason, human females take a lot of time grooming themselves," he said, looking at me with an apprehensive look. "Thanks," I mumbled, grabbing the hairtrician, using it to rip all the tangles out of my hair. After that I found a hair tie at the bottom of the tub and used that to put my hair in a simple ponytail. I didn't bother brushing my teeth because I was too grossed out at having to share a toothbrush with a mutt. I'll just ask Annie if I can use hers of something. Once again, Vince entered and grabbed my hand and walked me out of the house and over to his truck. I jumped in on the passenger side, rushing to do my own seatbelt this time. Vincent sped down the road, one arm around my shoulders, the other attached to the steering wheel. So I began, not wanting to sit in boring silence. "Why are you only the future beta, and not the current one?" Vincent looked happy that I was talking to him. His smile grew bigger and he straightened up, puffing out his powerful chest with pride. "Well, I told Jason I'll become the official beta as soon as I find my mate. So that's why there's really no official beta at the moment. What about your dad?" I thought that ranks that held power in the werewolf community were hereditary. Therefore, Vincent's dad should be the current beta if he's meant to be the future one. Vincent's posture slouched and his grip on me tightened. My, parents died in the Great War. The Great War was what was referred to as the war that followed after the werewolves and vampires exposed themselves. It was pretty brutal. The human forces killed my mother, and since she was my father's mate, he died shortly after due to heartbreak. I sat silent for a little bit. Vincent was orphaned in the Great War, at the hands of humans, and he chose one as a mate. How ironic. He cleared his throat and continued. Jason took care of me for a while. His father was Alpha at the time. He died in combat. That's why Jason's one of the youngest Alphas at age 29. And you told him you didn't want to be Beta until you found your mate? I asked. Vincent nodded. I knew that with a mate, I'd be motivated a lot more to protect the pack. He pulled me closer to him, nuzzling me. Now I have you to look after. You're my family. WWWW, that was creepy. We sat in awkward silence until we pulled up in front of Danny's house. So it made me feel a little better to know we weren't the first ones here. I got out of the truck, only to have Vincent quickly wrap his arm around my waist, pulling me closer to him. Listen, mate, he whispered in my ear. Stay away from the other werewolf males here. Got it. What about the human ones? I joked. You and I both know how easily a werewolf can kill a human, so don't test me. His grip tightened and I pulled into full contact with his body. That shut me up. I nodded. I was led up to the front door, where Vincent knocked, and stood with part of his body in front of me. Reed answered the door and only looked at Vincent. Beta? He smiled. I'm glad you and your mate could make it. So I don't even have a name anymore. I was ushered inside, walking through the living room and out into the backyard. Danny's backyard was pretty big. It had to be at least 3 times the size of our math class. There was an in-around pool in the dead center, around a cement way, and around that lush green grass. The backyard was already full with werewolves and few humans. Most of them I recognized from school, but a good number of them were older and hence had to be friends of Reed. It was easy to tell which human was mated. They stood next to the werewolf, the wolf having his or her arm wrapped tightly around the human. I even saw a male werewolf with a male human mate. I heard it could happen in rare numbers, but this was the first pair I've seen. There were a few unmated werewolves. I noticed that Kyle was here, wearing only swim trunks to show off his muscles to some unmated human girl, who was ignoring him. Nora, Danny called. I turned my head and saw her waving to me. I began to walk over to her, but Vincent growled and literally yanked me back to his side. Where are you going? He snarled. Today, I muttered. Vincent looked over to where I was going to walk, verifying that Danny was standing there. He let go and leaned in closer to me. Check back with me in 5. Yeah, there's no way I'm doing that. I shrugged and walked over to Danny. Hey Nora, she cheered. Glad you could make it. Come upstairs. There's someone here I want you to meet. I followed her back into the house and up the stairs into a bedroom that I deduced to belong to someone else as it only had a twin bed in it. There's no doubt in my mind that Reed makes Danny share a room with him and they have a double bed. In the bedroom was a tall female werewolf with blonde hair. She glanced at me over her sunglasses and snorted. You Nora? She asked in a monotone voice. Yes, I murmured. Was this Crystal? The female werewolf looked at Danny. Close the door, she ordered. Danny closed the door and led me over to the bed to sit down with her. Nora, this is Crystal, Reed's sister, Danny said, motioning at the werewolf. I'm saved. This is the woman who's supposed to save me from Vincent and this pathetic pack. Crystal looked me over and strained her ears, most likely to make sure no one could hear us. You got the $5, she asked. Not at the moment, I began, but I can get. Then go, Crystal interrupted, opening the door. I'm not risking my ass for free. Come back when you can pay me, and make it quick. Your mate already sent it you. You reek like beta male. That can't be it. Nonetheless, Danny got up and led me out of the bedroom and into one that I knew was hers due to the double bed. Sorry about that, she said. Crystal can be a little irritable. It's fine. I lied. I have no idea how on earth I'm going to come up with 500. What did she mean by Vincent sent it me? Danny chuckled. It's a little hard to miss. I cocked my eyebrow at her. What do you mean? Danny stopped laughing. He must have done it when you were sleeping then, she almost whispered. What do you mean? I all but shouted. Well, Danny mumbled, shifted on her feet. When a werewolf scents their mate, they have to get rid of the mate's original scent. The way they do that is by, I'm sure how to put this lightly, so I'll just say it. Vincent licked you head to toe and then rubbed against you to get his scent on you so that other werewolves would smell him on you, thinking of you as his property. I was seeing red. Vincent licked my body while I was sleeping. What kind of sick fuck does that? Oh, I know. A werewolf. Screw this. I ripped my shirt over my head and threw it to the floor. I then dropped my shorts. Nora. What are you? Danny asked in a nervous voice. Relax, I said. I'm going to prove to a certain fleabag that Nora Song is no one's property, especially a dog's. Danny looked me over as I stood in front of her, wearing my small bikini that virtually left nothing to the imagination. Vincent's gonna go a peshed. You realize that? He'll live, I responded, walking out of the room. I had noticed that even Danny was wearing a tee, shirt and long shorts. It's in the low 90s. I want to be able to stay at least semi-cool, and that's my excuse for why I'm wearing the bikini. I walked outside the house, entering the backyard. A few of the werewolves looked at me. A couple of the unmated male werewolves howled with approval and clapped their hands. To play it up, I pushed my chest forward, making my boobs look bigger. Kyle whistled and shouted for more. Then silence followed as a loud snarl erupted from the crowd and I faced a very pissed-off Vincent. Pool party. PT. To sometimes I wish that, just once, it thinks something over before I act. Like now, for instance. I was mad at Vincent for scenting me without my permission and partly for scenting me in the first place because it just sounds frickin' disgusting. Therefore, I decided to strip down to my bikini and go outside, where Vincent went psycho. As soon as I was outside, I felt arms wrap around my body, pulling me into him. He was trying to shield my body away from the unmated wolves, who still hooted and hollered for me to take my top off. Vincent started to walk into Diana's house, and because HES likes so much stronger than I was practically dragged. Once indoors, Vincent pushed me back at arm's length, keeping me in his clutches. His eyes were bright yellow and his body was shaking a little from his anger. He just stood there, staring me down for what seemed like an eternity, before he decided to speak up. What the hell do you think you're doing? He snarled. I had to clear my throat and swish some spit around my mouth to get it wet so I could respond. It's hot and I didn't want to overheat. I lied. Well, sure it was hot out, but I highly doubt it overheat. Then again the pool, Vincent growled. This one I really had a legitimate excuse for. I don't know how to swim. I never learn it. The main reason for that is being that since our territory is located in what used to be called North Dakota, there's not really any large body of water nearby where I could have learned it. Plus pools were a luxury, which is amazing that Reed managed to get one. Well, which. Then again, I suppose he was compelled to please Danny, who always talked about swimming and junk like that. I'm fairly sure I could have learned it if I was allowed to run away to Florida. Before Vincent could say anything, the backsliding glass door opened and Jessie walked in, wearing a small black bikini. She could pull off bathing suits better than me. That lucky bitch. Dude, Nora, she gushed. I know you don't want to hear it, but Kyle can't stop talking about how sexy he thinks you look. I heard from Veronica that he wants to ask you to prom. She looked all giddy until her eyes landed on a very pissed-off Vincent. His grip on my arms tightened and he let out a low growl. He had taken his shirt off earlier, so I saw how his powerful chest muscles expanded and contracted with every deep breath he took. Who's Kyle? He demanded, looking at me like I had wronged him somehow. I rolled my eyes. HES, some loser who's had a crush on me since you guys revealed yourselves. Ice coughed. Vincent doesn't need to worry about me, www. Kyle. Just the thought of Kyle made a rise up in my throat and my stomach twist with nausea. Vincent's face physically relaxed and he stared at me for a little while longer. Jessie stood in awkward silence, wondering whether or not she should leave. Vincent finally smirked and turned to her. Jessie, he barked, bring Kyle in here. She nodded and literally ran out of the house and into the backyard. Vincent looked back at me, his smirk still dominating his features. I told you, mate, he said in a velvet voice. I need to protect you from everything, vampires, dangerous people, yourself, and now even horny werewolf males. However, it seems to me that you don't like to listen, so I'm gonna show you the reason why I'm so protective of you. That didn't sound good at all. Are you going to feed me to a vampire? I whimpered, my heart speeding up with fear. I've never seen one before, but I was told that they were even more frightening than werewolves, particularly because they eat humans. I heard that when a vampire mates with a human, there's some kind of method that they use to feed from them without turning them into one of them. Hence the human basically becomes a blood bank. A look of horror passed over Vincent's face. He pushed his face closer to mine. Listen to me, Nora. He whispered, it never hurt you. Ever. But this you need to learn. If he tries to hurt you, scream and he'll come save you. That sure as shit didn't calm me down. What? I whimpered, my legs getting shaky. Jessie came back into the home, followed by Kyle. He was wearing a pair of tight board shorts, and that was it. His chest was muscled, but not as much as Vincent's. Plus, he appeared to be about a half-foot shorter than Vincent as well. What is it, Beta? He asked, in a voice that didn't sound at all like the pervert he usually was. This one was all respectful and mature. Vincent straightened his posture, looking bigger, and put his muscular arm around my tiny shoulders. You're going to teach my mate how to swim, he said. You have my permission to talk to her and to touch her. Permission to touch me. Kyle needs to get that from me, not Vincent. I glanced over at Kyle, who fought to hide his smile. Vincent seemed oblivious to this as he pushed me forward. I looked back at him with pleading eyes. I don't want to do this, I hissed. For a brief second, a pained expression crossed Vincent's face. Relax, Nora, Kyle said. I'm a lifeguard at the community pool. I'm the perfect candidate to teach you how to swim. He held out his hand and I hesitantly took it, ignoring the low growl from Vincent. I was led outside and over to the pool. Vincent had followed us, standing about 2 feet away. The rest of the partygoers were acting as if nothing was going on at all, talking about this and that. Danny was even talking to Crystal, who looked bored out of her mind as she sipped at her red plastic cup. I stood at the edge of the sidewalk where the pool was, letting my toes hang off the ledge. I looked at the ground to see 15 feet's prey, painted in black right where we stood. Great, great. Kyle led me to the deep end. Can't we start over at the 4 feet point? I asked, pointing in its direction. It's too crowded, Kyle said. Besides, there's no one at this point, so we'll have the water to ourselves. Vincent looked a little pained and he bit his lower lip and clenched his fist even harder. When he looked over at me, his posture visibly relaxed and he gave me a shy smile. I turned away from him. It's his fault that I have to do this in the first place. Well, jump in, Kyle said. Ya no, totally immerse ourselves. That way you're forced to deal with the water head on. Now follow me. He let go of my hand and jumped in the pool, sending cold water splashing all over my legs. I watched him submerge almost to the bottom before he kicked himself up back towards the surface. Soon his head bobbed up and he swam over to the edge. Your turn. I hesitantly looked at the deep water. Now I heard somewhere, most likely from Jesse, that fat people float. Now I have a good muffin top when I wear jeans. So hopefully that will keep me afloat, however. If I start to drown, then it's Kyle who'll save me. I sat down at the edge of the water and put my legs in. Then I slowly slid the rest of my body into the pool, feeling the water pull me. My hands clasped the edge of the walkway, keeping me above the water. Vincent chuckled. You weren't lying, were you? He asked. You really can't swim. I shook my head. Kyle inched his way over to me and put his hands on my hips, which were only covered by the string of my bikini bottom. It felt gross, having his dirty hands on my bare skin, making me feel sick to my stomach. Shit. Given the choice between him and Vincent, I'd kick the latter. Sure, Vincent may be a pain in the ass, but at least HS modestlies. "'Kay now, Nora, let's move out into the middle," he said. He was right up in my personal space, his face right next to mine. It felt disgusting and I wanted nothing more than to get out, which was what I started to do. I put my hands flat on the edge and pushed myself out of the water. I had my torso completely out when Vincent leaned down and pushed my shoulders back, making me fall back into Kyle's chest. "You wanted this, Nora," he growled. "I'm just giving it to you." Kyle laughed quietly and wrapped one arm around my waist and led me out into the middle of the pool. I frantically kicked my legs and waved my arms, struggling to keep my head above the water. This only made Kyle laugh even harder. "You need to relax, Nora, or else you'll sink right to the bottom," he chuckled. "Now fill your lungs up with air. Breathe in." I followed his orders, putting my hand on his beefy shoulder to support me. I sucked as much air into my lungs as I could, hoping that would help me stay afloat. Still, it felt as if weights were attached to my feet, seemingly dragging me to the bottom. "Now, Nora, I'm gonna let you go." And you just kick and moved your arms in a circular motion. "Got it," Kyle said, grabbing my hand that was hooked onto his shoulder. I shook my head. "Don't," I shouted. "If he makes me let go, then I'm going to drown and the LL be the end of me." Despite my pleas, Kyle lifted my hand off him and gently pushed me away out into the water where I was by myself. Shit. I need to relax if else I'll die. Yeah, that didn't help at all. As soon as I was by myself, my head plopped below the surface and I sank all the way to the bottom of the pool, my butt touching the ground in a few seconds. Maybe I need to put on more fat or something. I opened my eyes under the water, watching every owner's feet at the other end of the pool. No one seemed to know that I was about to meet my death, my chest starting to ache without my precious oxygen. I glanced up at Kyle's legs, which were swimming away and over to the edge where he got out of the pool. That traitor. He left me here to die. Well, I'm dead. That's it. Nora Song, age 18. Forced to be a stupid werewolf-ass mate, only to die at a pool party. Wow, that's the lamest obituary ever. I laid back, my back touching the ground of the pool now. The sky was bright and rippled with the little waves of the water. Then the waves moved more rapidly and a figure blocked the sunlight from my eyes. I felt something grab me beneath my arms and yank me upwards. I was pulled all the way up to the surface where my head finally popped out of the water. I gasped for breath and looked back to see Vincent, his arms securely fastened around me, keeping me trapped to him. "I'm sorry, mate," he panted. "I'll never do that to you. Just know that I love you and want you to be safe at all times." He pulled me closer to him, if that was even possible, and laid a wet kiss on my cheek, making me internally gag. He then smiled to himself. "Now I'm going to teach you how mates swim." Great, great. There's another difference with mates of werewolves. Will it never end? Vincent turned around, so that I stared at the back of his head. He held both of my arms and positioned them so that one went over his left shoulder and the other under his right, making me hold them together in front of his chest. It was a little difficult considering how broad his back was, but I managed to keep them together. "Hold on tight," he said, patting my hands. He then leaned forward and began to kick his legs and maneuver his arms so he propelled us to the side of the pool. The whole way, I just rested on his back, feeling his powerful muscles flex as he moved. When he reached the edge, he unclasped my hands and pushed me forward. He even put his hands on either side of my waist, lifting me out of the water and onto the walkway. "See," he smiled. "I can take care of you." I guess he can, but that still doesn't change my mind about anything. I turned and walked off, leaving him as he struggled to get himself out of the pool. Jessie walked up to me, handing me a towel. "So," she said, "Danny told me about the thing you and Crystal are planning." She kept her voice low so that no werewolf around could hear. I looked over to Vincent, who finally managed to crawl out of the pool. As soon as he was on his feet, he looked around, searching for me. I guess I was hard to spot, because after a while, he looked a little worried. It seemed weird. His black hair was wet and matted to his forehead, giving him a childish appearance, and his eyebrows were knit together. His chest heaved with his deep breaths and his eyes were darting all around the party. His teeth weren't bared, but I could see them as he grinned them in desperation. Then, to top it all off, I heard a slight whimper escape from him. It was pitiful. He stood there, all dripping wet and alone at the edge of the pool, his head turning all fast trying to find where I wandered off to, whimpering like an injured puppy. Finally, I just couldn't take it anymore. "Vincent," I called. "Over here." Immediately, he perked up and shot a glance in my direction. His worried face disappeared and his face broke out into the biggest smile I'd ever seen anyone wear in my life. He hurried over to me, wrapped both his arms around me, pulling me into him. He nuzzled me, laying a quick kiss on my cheek. "I couldn't find you," he whispered. I was so scared. It was so odd to see a grown werewolf diminish to a child in a matter of seconds, all because he was by my side. The pathetic sight of Vincent whimpering, searching for me made me feel bad for the guy a little bit. That's the only reason why I said, "I'm not going anywhere. Relax." It was meant to make him feel better and to avoid seeing that creepy side again. Jessie smiled then, looking happy. "Good for you, Nora." She cheered. "I guess this means you're not running away anymore." My heart dropped and Vincent unleashed the most blood-curdling snarl I've ever heard in my life. Confrontation. Now many things were running through my mind at this moment. The first was focusing on how much I wanted to murder my best friend right now. Thanks to her big mouth, Vincent now knows all about my plan to run away from him. Although, at the same time I'm relieved that he doesn't know that it was to Florida. So if I ever do manage to escape, he won't think about searching there. The second thing was how I was going to escape now. There's no doubt in my mind that Vincent's possessive instincts will be in full drive now. I read about that in our werewolf class at school. Whenever a wolf's mate, they're always human in these scenarios, expresses a desire to leave, the wolf mentally snaps and does everything in their power to keep their mate by their side, even if force is necessary. Lastly, I couldn't shake the feeling of Vincent's tightening grip on my waist with his strong arms. Yep, he snapped, having his animalistic instincts overcome his brain. If I thought that he was possessive earlier, I'm in a world of hurt now. Jessie stood in front of us, mouth hanging open in shock. I didn't know, she sputtered. She put her hands up in defense and then ran off. So first she causes Vincent to go all apeshed on me, and now she leaves me. I hate you, Jessie. Vincent still growled in my ear, keeping me trapped to his body. I think it's time for us to go home, he growled. I could hear his voice was strained, trying to keep himself from yelling. He didn't let go of me, but instead began to walk into the house, pushing me in front of him, still with his vice grip on me. We dripped water onto the carpet, but Reed kept his mouth shut when he looked at us. I still haven't seen Vincent's face, but I'm fairly sure that it's something even the devil would be afraid of. I was ushered over to the truck and Vincent opened the passenger door for me. I didn't use my own legs to get in. Vincent literally shoved me inside, slamming the door hard right behind me. Not wanting to get into any more trouble, I sat up and put my seatbelt on. Vincent got in on the driver's side. As soon as he had his door shut, he snarled at me. Go figure, I was right. He was terrifying. He bared his teeth at me, not like I've seen before, but really showing them off. His canines were on full display, gleaming with the power they had. His eyes were bright yellow and narrowed at me, looking over me, calculating my every move. Vincent leaned over and unclicked my seatbelt. Before I could say anything, he pulled me closer to his body, then wrapping his seatbelt around the both of us. His right arm was securely fastened around me the whole time as he began to drive, using only his left for the steering wheel. His breathing was hard and controlled, and every now and then I'd hear him growl. Hed glanced down at me and tightened his hold, letting out another low growl. I'm only going to say this once, mate, he snarled. You belong to me. After that he was silent, leaving only the rumble of engine between us. I noticed that his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He was gripping it so hard. I looked out the passenger side window, too afraid to start my own conversation. A part of me shouted to apologize, only to make him happy and have him quit this whole creepy FA. Where were you gonna go anyway? Vincent snarled. I'm all you have. Your parents kicked you out. I'm your only family now. Seriously. Though, where? I couldn't tell him Florida. Iceland. I lied. Vincent's chest vibrated with the deep growl he let out. I realized that he left his shirt at Dana's house. I also seemed to notice that he looked bigger, like his muscles grew or something. You know, Rake J actually a territory where both werewolves and vampires live. He growled. You like vampires more than me or something. Right now, I totally do. He seemed to be confrontational with this question, ready to fight me if I answered it wrong. His arms strained, fighting to keep control. I've never met a vampire. I've never met a vampire, I said. Vincent didn't respond. We pulled up in front of his house and he pulled me out of the truck, keeping a tight grip on my arm as he led me up the walkway. The legend of Lacey, the girl who was attacked by her pissed-off werewolf mate, flashed in my mind. HE's going to kill me. Vincent's going to take me inside the house where he'll kill me. The whole up the walkway he wouldn't look at me, but instead had his hand tightly coiled around my wrist, totally bruising it. My heart sped up and I started to wheeze, I can't go into this house. If there's one thing in life I should never do, it's never go into a psychotic werewolf-ass house. Vincent stopped in front of the door and let go of me to turn the key into the lock. And that was all I needed. I turned on my barefoot heels, scrapping them up a little bit. Then I pushed forward, springing out my legs to propel me. I pumped my arms to help quicken my pace, and before I knew it, I was running away from Vincent literally. I made it down the walkway and onto the sidewalk when I heard a ferocious snarl. Because I'm so smart, I decided to look back and see what made that noise. Where Vincent had stood was now a werewolf in its animal form. Unlike what TV has shown, werewolves don't turn into actual wolves. Instead, their human form gets larger and significantly hairier. Their head certainly turns into a wolf's head and they sprout a tail, but that's about it. Their ankles rise higher on their legs, but they stay bipedal. They do run faster on all fours though. Obviously their claws grow on their hands and feet. Usually werewolves wolf out when they get really pissed at something. Another time is when their mate is in danger and they need to eliminate the threat. Vincent must have grown to feet taller in his wolf form. His fur was midnight black, probably darker than the hair on his head while HES in his human form. His yellow eyes were still trained on me and he bared his teeth, snarling in my direction again. Man, I pissed this wolf off. Now logic dictates that I immediately go to his side. However, excuse me for thinking that going towards a full-blown werewolf is a bad idea. Instead, I opened my mouth and screamed like bloody murder, running as fast as my legs would carry me in the other direction. I probably made it about 2 feet before Vincent caught me. I felt his big hairy arms wrap around me. Everything was a blur. I saw the street where I was running, then the sky, then Vincent's wolf head, and then the inside of the house. I was kicking and screaming the entire way, even yelling for help. Yet no one came to help me from the monster that pulled me into its house. I hate the people here. Wolf Vincent carried me upstairs, swinging me over his shoulder. He walked into his bedroom and literally threw me onto the bed. I tried to get up and maybe jump out of the window, but he pounced on me, pinning me down onto the bed underneath his immense form. Mind, he snarled, licking the side of my face. We laid there for a while, in the position he had told me about the other night. This was the one where the werewolf trapped the mate to him, pinning them under their weight. Vincent shifted back into his human form, the weight decreasing a little on me. Why do you run? He demanded. Isn't it obvious? Because? I shouted, pushing on his chest with all my might. Surprisingly, he moved off me. I stood up off the bed and turned to face him, my own face red with anger. I hate you. I screamed. Vincent flinched. He struggled to keep his composure, but I could tell my words poisoned him. But I was glad. He chased me in his wolf form and dragged me away from my life. Well, that's too bad, he whispered. I'm not letting you go. With that, he walked out of the room, slamming the door shut behind him. I heard what sounded like him sitting on the floor, his back resting on the door. HES really not letting me go. Unexpected. I must have sat on the bed for a couple of hours, just thinking of my options. The way I see it, I have virtually none. When stupid Jessie ran her big mouth, revealing to Vincent that I had planned to run away from him, he went all psycho and his possessive instinct kicked in. Therefore, HES going to be even more annoying and clingy than usual. Now that leads me to my desire to leave him. There's no way he'll let me out of his sight, so that means that Crystal's help is now out of the question. I suppose it always was figuring that there was no way it'd be able to come up with the money she required for her service anyway. I looked out the window. The sun had set and there were no stars out tonight. The moon was close to being full, which meant that in most likely today's, Vincent's wolf will be in charge. I actually know how to explain this one because every full moon, humans are warned to stay indoors. With a werewolf, it's like there's two people inside one body, kind of. The werewolf is completely aware of everything. However, there's a tiny voice inside their head, called their wolf. This inner wolf will sometimes guide them on what to do and will even tell them when they have found their mate. It's kind of creepy, because when the wolf wants something, the werewolf is usually helpless in acting out its desired actions. Therefore, when the wolf becomes fully in charge of the limbs and all actions of the werewolf, it's a little frightening. It's always during the full moon that humans disappear. That is, except for the humans who were chosen to be the mates of wolves. The wolf will keep the human mate by their side all day, not even letting them do the simplest tasks alone, even showering. I heard Danny once walked to paces from Reed's side during a full moon, and his wolf flipped out. Because wolves are more animalistic than the werewolf, it's not unusual for them to bite or slash at their human mates. It usually happens when the human does something that the wolf isn't fond of. And then, boom. They look like two fare in the hospital with tons of flesh wounds. They are never killed, but they do oftentimes come close to death. Therefore, I need to leave Vincent within 2 days' time. If I don't, then I own deception by Dwightness. Knowing me, he'll do something that will result in him attacking me on the full moon. I guess the best option is to leave at night when he's asleep. I groaned and wiped at my tired eyes. When I did, I smelt the chlorine on them from the swimming pool and gagged. I walked over to the door and tried to open it, but when I tried, I hit something behind it and heard Vincent growl. "Where are you trying to go now?" he snarled from the other side. "I want to take a shower," I said. "Fine." He sighed and got up off the ground. He opened the door and grabbed my hand, leading me out of the bedroom and over to the bathroom. He pushed me inside and closed the door behind me, sitting down in front of it again. I looked around the small bathroom, noticing that there was no window, which totally explained why he was so accepting as to let me into this room all by myself. I walked up to the counter, feeling the plaque on my teeth, making me scowl. I turned on the hot water faucet, letting it get all steamy, and then ran the one toothbrush under it for a good 2 minutes before I scrubbed my teeth clean. After that, I stripped off the bikini and jumped into the bathtub, closing the glass door behind me. Once inside, I turned on the water, making it a little hot. I wet my hair, feeling the steaming water hit my skin, washing away the nasty pool smell. I closed my eyes and relaxed for a little bit. Then I heard the door open. I jerked and looked through the glass to see that Vincent had walked inside the bathroom. He closed the door and turned to face me. "What are you doing?" I demanded. Deep inside, I was thanking God that the steam had fogged up the glass door, making my naked body blurred. I silently cursed myself for not locking the door. Vincent chuckled. Nora, he laughed. "I own you, so I don't think you have the right to be questioning me like that." I fought the urge to shout for him to go fuck himself. Instead, I grabbed the shampoo, noticing that it was Guy's. Oh well. I put some into my hair and lathered it up, rinsing it out. "Can I help you?" I scoffed, knowing damn well that Vincent was still standing there. "My wolf just wanted to be near you," he explained. He walked over, and for a brief second, I feared that he'd jump in the shower with me. However, instead he sat down on the toilet lid, just remaining silent. Could he seriously get enjoyment out of just being in the same room with me? What a freak. I washed the shampoo out of my hair and went to wash my body. Vincent cleared his throat, getting my attention. "What?" I snapped. "I just want to say," he began, "that what you said earlier in the room really hurt me." "You mean when I told you that I hate you?" I smiled. Vincent growled. Anyway, I want to tell you that even if you don't like me, I still love you. Then he stood up and walked over to the door. He opened and stood in the doorway, pausing for a bit. He then turned back to face me. And no matter what, I always will. Then he left and closed the door. I rolled my eyes and rinsed the body wash off me. I turned off the shower and opened the glass door to get the one towel that was in the bathroom. Once I was all dried off, I wrapped the towel around me and walked out of the bathroom to go get changed in the bedroom. When I got in there, I saw Vincent was there as well, sitting on the bed with a smirk on his face. Whatever, I don't have time for him. I walked over to the corner where my boxes of clothes were, only to find that the corner was there. I cocked my eyebrow and looked over at Vincent in confusion. "Where's my clothes?" I asked. Vincent, still with a smirk on his face, pointed over to the bed. There was a pair of my underwear and one of his shirts. "You're wearing that," he said. "No, I'm not," I scoffed, folding my arms over my chest. "Fine," Vincent shrugged. "Walk around naked. In fact, I'll join you." He pulled the shirt off his body and went to pull down the basketball shorts he had on. Vampire deception. By Drake Mason and E.Y. Gwait. As an undocumented changeling and forced to cause at a low-level wage, I shouted. He paused. "I'll wear your stupid shirt." Vincent's smile grew even larger, taking up most of his face. "Great, great," he cheered. "Use my cleansing products. Use my towel. And now you're wearing my shirt. There's no doubt that other wolves will know you're mine. That sly son of a bitch, literally." I ground my teeth and trudged over to the bed. Figuring that he'll try anything to see anyway, I let the towel fall to the ground. Immediately Vincent's chuckling ceased and his mouth dropped. His eyes popped out of his head and he stared at me. I pulled on the underwear first and then slowly put on his shirt. It was way too big for me. The sleeves, which meant to be around his biceps, stopped at my elbows. Also, the end of it went way past my waist, almost covering my crotch. Sure enough, I could smell his nasty sweaty aura on it. It reminded me of PE class, which, go figure, he teaches. Vincent stood up off the bed and held out his hand to me. "Let me make you something to eat," he said. Hesitantly, I reached out to take his offered hand, but then my personality got in the way and I walked right by him. Vincent growled and grabbed my arm, yanking me to him. He then swung me over his shoulders, carrying me downstairs and into the kitchen like I was a sack of potatoes or something lighter because he walked as if he weren't even carrying something. When we made it to the kitchen, I was set back onto my feet. Vincent still kept his arm around me as he moved around the kitchen, searching through the cabinets for something to eat. Eventually he settled on ramen, which was pretty much the only food in his kitchen. He grabbed about 5 packets and a pot from one of the lower cabinets. He put all the stuff together, still with an arm keeping me securely at his side. There was a small table in the middle of the room, which he led me to. He pulled out a chair and sat in it, yanking me onto his lap. When I was forced on his, both of his arms acted as restraints, keeping me trapped to him. It was super uncomfortable. His legs are all hard from their packed-on muscle. Plus his arms are hard as well, not keeping me secure or anything. Whoever said that biceps were attractive didn't keep into account how hard they felt when they were being squeezed into you. He even rested his head on my shoulders, his chin digging into my body. "Mine," he mumbled. I rolled my eyes. I need to leave this place as soon as possible. I hate it here. I hate this house. I hate Vincent. I hate sitting in his stupid grasp. I hate this whole situation. We sat there for a while in silence. Vincent would just nuzzle me, growling in delight. I thought that was a little weird. Finally, we heard the water boiling, meaning the food was done. Vincent lifted me out of his lap finally, and went over to the stove. He turned off the flame and grabbed 2 bowls, filling them up with ramen. He then grabbed them and walked back to the table, setting them down. This time Vincent let me sit down in my own chair. He sat across from me, loudly slurping his food. At first I thought I wasn't hungry, but as soon as the food was in front of me, I gulped it down, not even too bothered when I burnt my tongue. When we were all finished, Vincent took both bowls back to the sink and quickly rinsed them off. He then turned to me. "Time for bed, mate," he said, grabbing me arm and once again throwing me over his shoulder. I'm starting to think he's doing this to show off his strength. He carried me into the bedroom and tossed me down onto the bed. The light was turned off before I could get my senses together, and I was soon tackled by Vincent. His heavy body was on top of me, cutting me down underneath. My arms were at my side, trapped as Vincent trapped his around me. He made sure to be low enough so that he didn't lay on my head. Instead, we both shared the one pillow on the bed. "Good night, mate," he whispered in the dark, kissing my cheek. "Love you," I grunted. For the longest time, me and Vincent lay in the bed. He managed to move the comforter blanket over us, making me pant with the heat. After about a half hour, Vincent started to lightly snore. "He's asleep now. Awesome." I began to wiggle my arms a bit, inch by inch freeing them from Vincent's grasp. Eventually I had them out. I then lightly pushed on his broad chest, feeling his hard muscles for a bit. He sure was buff. I pushed, trying to roll him over. Vincent made a little sound and I immediately stopped, my breath hitching in my throat. After 3 seconds, the snoring started back up and I began to push some more. Eventually there was a large enough space created in his hole for me to freedom. I slid on out, feeling my way off the bed blindly. I'm actually doing it. I'm going to be free of Vincent. Using my foot out in front of me, I swayed it in a zigzag motion, like a blind person with a cane. Foot by foot, I made my way across the floor of the bedroom, reaching the far wall. Then all I had to do was feel around that for the doorknob, which I amazingly found with ease as it was the first thing my hand touched. Finally, some good luck. I turned the doorknob slowly, quietly opening the door. I stepped out into the hallway. Vincent whimpered. I froze, not even daring to breath. I glanced back, looking at Vincent's outline from the shine of the moon. He was still asleep. However, he was twitching, like how a dog does in his sleep. He just kept on moving, whimpering, like he was chasing something in his dream, but Cal didn't catch up. I wonder what he's dreaming about like I care. I tiptoed out in the hall, finding the stairs, which I stepped on slowly, lest one should creak and wake up my captor. After the longest minute of my life escaping a werewolf-esque house sure is anxiety-ridden, I was at the base of the steps. Now I didn't really want to go in public, wearing only Vincent's shirt and my underwear, but what choice did I have? I walked over to the front door, undid the lock and chain, and opened it. Instantly air rushed inside, filling up my core with the sweet feeling of freedom of the outside world. Then I ran. I didn't even bother to lose Vincent's front door. Let some crazy rouge werewolf go in there and eat him. I don't care. I just ran on the sidewalk, turning left then running down that block. My feet began to pound as they hit the hard concrete over and over. Luckily, the hot weather made the cement feeling warm to the soles of my feet, allowing me to finally feel some ounce of comfort. I figured that doing a zigzag pattern when I reached the end of blocks would be good. On one I take a right, then a left, then a left, then a right, then a left, then turn around because it's a cul-de-sac, then a right. I didn't even know where I was going, and I didn't even know how I was going to get some appropriate clothes for later on. But right now, I didn't even care. The streets were empty, only the street lamps giving me some company. It was nice to be alone for a while after being smothered by some love-obsessed werewolf. Eventually, after my run, I reached the end of the neighborhood. At the end of the street that was blocked off was a forest. Perhaps if I ran in here, I could hide out for a little bit and then in the morning, find someone, maybe Danny, to help get me some clothes and get me out of the territory. Then I could just sneak through the territories until I reached Florida and salvation from werewolves. The howl of a werewolf sounded off in the not too far distance. Shit. It's Vincent. I started up in a sprint and made it for the forest. I looked behind me, hoping to God that I'd see nothing at all. However, thanks to my good luck, I got to see the large werewolf and wolf from run around the corner, coming my way. I quickened my pace, even bending down a little hoping to stop air resistance. My life depended on making it to the forest. I had to make it there in the coverage of the trees and leaves. Then maybe I could climb a tree and Vincent would run by me or something. I glanced back over my shoulder, seeing the large werewolf covering the distance that took me 30 seconds and just 4 flat. For some reason, Vincent looked a lot larger, like his wolf form had grown larger and more muscular. Could his extreme anger have done that to him? Wow, I really screwed myself over. I was only about a couple yards away from the forest when the werewolf behind me snarled. I stumbled over my feet, falling to the ground. I hit it pretty hard, the air rushing out of me. For a few moments, I lied dazed on the grass. This is it. Vincent's going to get me and then drag me back to the house. Then he'll break my legs, making me dependent on him. I looked up at the werewolf, who was only 20 feet away. He leapt up in the air, most likely to pounce on me. I flinched, but kept my eyes open, wanting to at least see the minute in which my life would end. The werewolf flew over me, landing at the clearing of the forest. I heard him snarl and then something else snarled back at him. I cocked my eyebrow and looked back to see the werewolf standing in a protective stance, obviously defending me from something. Fucking mutt. I heard a woman shriek from the forest. She ran out and charged at the werewolf. She was really tall and skinny. Her long black hair was really shiny and looked glossy in the moonlight. Her pale skin even seemed to glow. She bared her teeth, showing off her fangs. She's a vampire. The vampire pounced on the werewolf, latching her in his fur. The werewolf growled and began to buck around, eventually sending the vampire falling to the ground. The wolf then trapped her in his powerful jaws, biting down and thrashing his head. I covered my eyes, hearing the vampire shriek as she was ripped to pieces. After her cries were silences, I slowly moved my hands away from my face to stare at the werewolf who had just saved my life from a bloodthirsty vamp. I cleared my throat, trying to muster up the courage to speak. "Thank Vincent," I mumbled. The werewolf growled and stood up on his 2 legs. Slowly he morphed back into his human form, hair disappearing and shrinking to feet. At the end of the transformation, I realized that this werewolf was Vincent. The man was way taller and a lot more muscular. Plus, his hair was brown and it was put up in a spiky style like Vincent's. His hair was short and tame, because he had just phased back into a human. The man was naked. I'll admit, I glanced and sure enough, I liked it a lot more than Vincent's. This man even appeared to be older, maybe by about 5 years. I'm basing that off the age lines near the ends of his eyes. I'm not Vincent, the werewolf spoke in a baritone voice. You're Alpha. My jaw dropped. I was just saved from a vampire. By Alpha. Wow, there's no coming back from this. Now HES going to tell Vincent and he'll be forever punished. Then he'll never escape to Florida. Thanks for saving me, Alpha, I murmured, bowing my head in respect. I'd been taught in school that this was appropriate as Alphas were naturally more dominant and demanded more respect. Alpha chuckled. Call me Jason, he said. I looked up, seeing a large smile stretch on his face. His face was lit up with happiness, his canines poking out of his mouth, gleaming in the moonlight. I nodded. Thank you, Jason. If it were possible, Alpha's smile grew even larger and I saw his chest puff out with pride. If I didn't know any better, I'd say he was trying to show off his body, like what a lot of male werewolves do. They try to make it look like they can protect their female interest by doing so, luring them into a sense of security with them. Alpha spoke up again. Well, he smiled. Since you now know my name, can I get yours, mate? Nora, I answered. Then I jolted in shock. What did you call me? Alpha looked at me like I should already know. Nora, he said, walking over to me with fast steps. You're my mate. I fainted. Thank you all so much for joining me on this dangerous werewolf journey. I hope you had your hearts pumping and your minds racing. Don't forget to subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and come back for more exciting and dangerous tales. Until next time, stay safe and keep that adventurous spirit alive.